I have an idea for a list. Let's talk about the letter I, Nick. Get it? Do you get it?
I was gonna do the exact same joke because what I was going to do. Hey, everybody, my name is Nick.
I'm Mike.
We're the Brothers Murph. That's right. We're going through every letter in the alphabet because we thought it'd be an interesting series that we could do. We kind of did this through the top 1,000 games of BG. We think about doing years after this. Oh, we enjoy doing these series. Today we're talking about games that start with the letter I. And at first I was worried that we were going to have to combine this with another letter because I was like, I don't know if we have enough I games. Turns out we do. There's a lot of games that start with I.
Absolutely. So that's pretty sweet. So we are going to do 10 games to start with the letter I. And we like doing these lists because there's just a wide variety of games.
Yes. Because sometimes we're forced to choose games that maybe wouldn't be on a normal list, you know, because we don't have that many like J games or something. Yeah, you know?
Yeah, it's gonna be super cool. So here are games that we like, or I like. It doesn't work so good if we say we. These are I games.
Our number 10 is Iquazú. Iquazú is set kind of around the Iquazú waterfalls in South America, which are these big, beautiful waterfalls, but it's also kind of a mix between a fantasy world, because there's this kind of like Avatar looking people, like Avatar, like James Cameron's Avatar, and it's an interesting theme because you have the waterfall, which is like kind of the main thing, and then there is some kind of enemy coming into the land trying to steal your gems, and so you need to hide them, and the best place to hide them is behind the waterfall because y'all can swing in on these vines and grab the gems when you need to. It's a theme that I don't entirely understand, but it's very, very pretty. And it has a gimmick, a really fun gimmick, where there's this big like water lizard walking across the top of the waterfall and it's blocking the water. And then that essentially allows you to swing in and grab these gems. And so you're going in there trying to grab these gems and put out, or rather you're trying to put these gems in there because you're trying to hide them. And every character has different colored gems, and you're swinging over in behind the waterfall and trying to put these gems. And basically you're going for area control in these various columns and getting points for doing so. It's a really interesting game that is pretty simple. It's in HABA's, like, they're kind of more family weight games with like Adventureland, Karuba. It's in one of those heavyweight, not heavyweight, it's a slightly heavier than they're like animal upon animal type games. That's what I'm getting at. And it is fun, I will say, and like the gimmick of it is really cool. The gimmick makes it a little fiddly because you have to like put all these tiles behind the waterfall and then set up the waterfall. But the way it works with the water lizard moving across the top and then exposing more and more behind the waterfall. It's a really cool theme that's kind of odd, like in the end, but it's still kind of charming and really fun. It's got a cool little gimmick. It's got a great look, good 3D board. Iquazú is ultimately a pretty fun game, if a little fiddly, but ultimately pretty darn cool.
I do declare that our number 9 game is Inside Job. Now, this is a trick-taking game with a traitor, someone or a few people possibly who do not belong. They're on the team of double agents and things. So this is a trick-taking game where everyone that is, you know, part of the goods guys, they basically are going to be given missions each trick, saying kind of like the crew, where you know, someone needs to get a certain color of card or win X amount of tricks and stuff to complete each mission. And as a good guys, you're just trying to complete as many missions as you can. As one of the baddies, you're trying to win 4 tricks, 4 hands. Each time anyone wins a trick, they get a little suitcase and stuff. So the reason we like this game is it brings natural sort of suspicion about people, because if I'm one of the goodies and just the way the missions are working out, I keep winning tricks. If I get to 2 or 3 tricks won, people are gonna start getting really suspicious about like, why are you winning so much? And if I'd say, well, I'm trying to complete the mission, you could say, that's exactly what a bad guy would say. They're just trying to complete the mission, but you keep winning these tricks, share the love and stuff. So you all end up really suspicious of each other naturally. And that's for kind of like a social deduction type game, is something that we always really enjoy. Is that where a game will just make everyone look a little bit sus all the time. So that is Inside Job.
Number 8 is gonna be the newest in the Imperial Settlers line. This is Imperial Miners. There's Imperial Settlers, Empires of the North, and now Imperial Miners, and then I think 51st State was like kind of like the original. They've kind of done a lot of these kinds of games at this point. But Imperial Miners is the newest one that came out like Gen Con this year. And in this case, it's actually pretty different than the other ones. In this case, you have different factions like you do in those kinds of games, but everyone can get cards of the different factions. And you're gonna be playing with, I think, 3 of them in each game. So you play with like the Egyptians, the Japanese faction, and then like the Scots, you know, the Scotland faction or whatever. And you're basically getting these cards and placing them down, and you're diving deeper and deeper and deeper into these mines. And then you're gonna activate these cards. When you activate one, when you put a card down, you're gonna activate it, but then you're gonna activate stuff in a line all the way back up to the surface. And so it's about chaining stuff together and about kind of setting stuff up in a way that you can essentially chain these in the best way possible. There's also, each faction is gonna have a track that you can kind of bump and go up that all work differently. So as you choose what factions to kind of put in the game, you're kind of choosing what kind of game you want. So if you have like the barbarian faction, it's gonna be a little bit meaner because that's what it is like in Empires of the North. And I actually thought it was really, really fun. I enjoy games where you're trying to set up combos and chains. And this one does it in an interesting way where you're kind of delving further and further and further into your mind, which is harder to do because the cards get more expensive as they go down. But then you're also trying to put stuff next to each other in a way where you can kind of go like all the way up through. And it's just a really cool concept. I'm excited to play this one more. I've only played it a couple times now, but I'm excited to kind of dive into it more because I like combos. I like engine builders. This is kind of a tableau builder. It's just an interesting thing and I want to play it more. So Imperial Miners is really, really fun.
Number 7 is Istanbul. This is a game that I came across via the app for Istanbul and really quite enjoy. This is a game that's been around for a little while, and in it you basically have a family that are represented with your kind of stack of discs, which are your workers, and you have a board that you're going around, and you are going around and collecting resources and then ultimately turning those resources in to earn rubies. You want to do various things that can earn you rubies, and it's a race to get 5 rubies. So you can do it either by money, turning in resources, kind of contract fulfillment, all sorts of stuff like that. But there's this great spatial element to the game because as you pick up your stack, leaving one of your workers behind, you can move to a new space in this kind of grid of actions and then drop off another worker and make use of that. But eventually you might run out of people in your stack, your family members, and there's an action you can take to kind of gather everybody back. But what you can also do is sort of plan it so that you can work your way sort of backward. And if you land on a action space that you've previously visited, so there's already a family member of yours on that stack, you will instead collect that worker and add back to your stack. So it's really kind of this great programming, sequencing efficiency game where I want to go up to these different spaces to get these resources and things, make sure I kind of backtrack through to again collect those resources and have those workers so that I can have no wasted turns, really. There's a lot of race elements where like, if I'm the first one to get to this thing and get a ruby, it becomes more expensive for people who try to do that in the future, so you want to be the first one to kind of get access to these rubies, and it ultimately is simply a racing game to get to those 5 rubies. Istanbul is just a really classic, really fun. The spatial element of the game is really something we just don't see a ton of, so that's Istanbul.
Number 6 is a mix of Carcassonne and cartographers, and this is Isle of Skye. Isle of Skye is a great Alexander Pfister game where you are putting out these tiles kind of Carcassonne style, where you're putting them out and kind of building out your board as you go. And these tiles have all sorts of symbols on them and all sorts of things that you're essentially trying to get and make. And there are going to be scoring opportunities, but it's gonna work a lot like Cartographers does, where you're gonna score this one and this one in the first round, and then this one and this one in the second round, and then this one and this one in the third round, and the fourth round you score this one and then this one again. And so it's one of those situations where I really, really love that kind of scoring, because I love being like, oh, I'm gonna score this now, but I'm thinking ahead for the future, where this one here, I'm gonna want these kinds of boats and lakes or whatever. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna want these ones later. So maybe I'll start setting that up now. Or there will get to a point where something won't score anymore. So you're like, well, I don't need to worry about that anymore because it's done. It's done scoring. I don't need to worry about it. And so you can kind of ignore it at that point. I really, really like Cartographers for that reason. I love Carcassonne, and then Isle of Skye comes and brings them together in an interesting way. And it has, I think it's called the Druids expansion that we haven't actually played yet, but I think once we play that expansion, this would have probably moved up this list a little bit if we had played it before we made this list, because people talk about the Druid expansion being really, really good. But Isle of Skye is just a really solid game. It's, you know, not super, super heavy, not super thinky, but if you like Carcassonne, if you like that kind of scoring, and you have cartographers, give Isle of Skye a shot because it's really, really good.
Number 5 is Indulgence. This is one of the first trick-taking games that we were introduced to that it wasn't just like hearts or spades, you know, played with a standard deck of cards. Of course, there's many trick-taking games from that. But Indulgence was one of the first ones that was like a board gamery trick-taking game, of which, of course, there are thousands and thousands. And this one is a game where every round you are basically given different edicts. Certain things will be valuable, certain things are going to be punishing for you. So you might want to be the one collecting sixes and things like that. And from round to round, that changes. What kind of will score you points, what will hurt you changes. And that right there was a major cool thing for us when we were fairly new to the hobby. The idea that like, the rules change from round to round, and that was one that's really cool. It's got these great bits as you're trying to collect money and stuff ultimately, and it's just got a lot of great production in a kind of a small package and stuff. So Indulgence is that kind of one of our first ones that we came across where it's like trick-taking with a twist, which is many of them now is finding the twist on trick-taking, and that's why we keep coming back. You saw with like Inside Job earlier in this very list, in fact. So there's seemingly no end to the amount of ways you can twist up stuff. But Indulgence and choosing the edicts when it's your turn, because if you're the one kind of choosing stuff, you can basically go off and do the opposite of things and score for being like a baddie or indulging and whatnot in your power. There's a lot of fun things to explore with this one. That is Indulgence.
Number 4 is a game that's not quite out yet, but we have had a chance to play it a number of times, and this is Inventions. Inventions is the new big Vita Lacerda game that came out on Kickstarter earlier this year, but it should be delivering hopefully soon-ish. And this is a game that is kind of taking you through time and inventions through time. So you start off kind of in the age of antiquity where you're like discovering fire and like the wheel and stuff like that, and then you get all the way through kind of modern times like you do in a lot of these Civ games where you're kind of going through time and going through civilization. But in this one, it's kind of basically all about the various inventions that you can do. And so you have a main board and you're kind of going around this board and you can propose inventions where you have like an idea for an invention, and then you can then work on that invention and then eventually invent that thing and then grab that new technology and put it into your kind of tableau, which will give you some more worker placement spots. And things like that. And one thing I like about the game is there's kind of a shared infrastructure in the game where a lot of these are ideas where it's like just because someone else puts this idea out there, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to invent that thing. Other people can invent them or innovate on it. Like, ooh, the wheel, but what if we did this to the wheel? And you can then innovate on it by putting out pieces, and then someone else can invent it. And it's also one of the things I like about the game is you can't invent something that you haven't worked on, don't know anything about, basically. And so you're like, well, I don't know anything about this because I haven't worked on it yet. And so there's a lot of these really interesting mechanics of like, just because you put something out doesn't necessarily mean you will be the one to finish that thing. You can innovate on stuff that you used to not know about, and now you do. It's really, really interesting. And then this is also kind of in a line of something that seems to be pretty common right now, which is like big, heavier Euros that are all about combos. This game, there's tons and tons of chaining in this game. There's literally called chaining actions, where a lot of the things you do essentially allow you to do a chain action. And you can chain a certain amount of things together depending on kind of how well you're going up this certain track. And that's what you really want to do, is you want to be able to chain as many possible things in a row, because you essentially are getting to do more actions. You're getting to do more things than your opponents. It's really, really fun. It's a big, heavy Vita Lacerda game, but I love that kind of shared infrastructure in games, and I love games where you chain stuff, and I'm glad to see that this kind of chaining things is moving into these heavier like Euro games, because it's one of my favorite mechanics, and I also love worker placement games and heavy Euro games, so peanut butter and jelly, baby.
Number 3 is the Initiative. This is a game where you're sort of working through puzzles, I'll say, in a contained story that you're working through cooperatively. So there's all these kind of riddle puzzles where you are trying to move around on this board to gain pieces of a cipher, usually, and then you can put that kind of into a checking system to see and kind of translate the cipher into the answer to a kind of a question that you're seeking out and things like that. What's really cool about this game is that it keeps it fairly simple about how you move around and go from room to room, and you are trying to avoid kind of these agents and things like that. But what's really cool is this game is a story within a story. So you are, as the players at the table, playing as a group of kids in like the 90s who go up to a garage sale and find this game called The Key, I believe, and you are playing as the kids who are playing the game that is ultimately the game that you, the players at the table, are playing. And there's a story that is, it's kind of told in like a comic book story with these kids that's going on, but this version of the game they found has been modified and things have been scratched out and stuff, and there's basically a mystery that they are solving, which of course is the mystery you are also solving. So I love the kind of nested storytelling of this one. It's very nostalgic because we were kids in the 90s who would go around to garage sales and find board games and stuff, so it feels very much like this was our life. But that whole idea of you're playing a board game within a board game, or the board game you're playing is part of the story itself. I don't know if I'm explaining that quite well, but like, it's just a really fun having the story, playing the game, and then that realization that you are not playing the initiative, you're playing the game that the kids are playing in the story. It's just super duper fun, and the mystery kind of unfolds and gets bigger, and it starts to affect the kind of real world of the story itself from those kids' perspective, and as the story kind of deepens and stuff. It's really, really cool, clever kind of problem solving and puzzle solving. That's the Initiative.
Number 2 is going to be Isle of Cats. Now, if I had to choose, at this point, there's actually kind of a couple Isle of Cats. I'm actually gonna choose the Explore and Draw. This is the roll and write version of Isle of Cats. Isle of Cats is a really great game where you have a ship and you're going to this island that is full of cats, and this island I think is burning down, or no, or maybe there's someone else coming to try and steal the cats. I don't know. You gotta get the cats off this island. I don't remember the exact theme of what it was. You gotta get these cats off these islands, but cats are always sprawled out in all these different ways, and so they're all polyomino tiles, and you are trying to get them onto your boat and fit them together and get as many cats as you possibly can. And you're attracting them with fish and stuff, and you are drafting out these cards. It's essentially going to tell you what you can draft, and you can also draft out essentially scoring opportunities and things like that. It's really, really fun, but I've kind of cooled on Isle of Cats, but one thing I haven't really cooled on is the Explore and Draw. When COVID hit and everyone's kind of at home, the people who make Isle of Cats kind of made a remote version that you could play. They made a Isle of Cats kind of remote edition that was a roll and write version that you can kind of play at home, and you can play kind of across Zoom. And it's really, really fun. And then they eventually made it into a full game called the Explore and Draw, which is really, really cool. And this one is, it's just kind of a simplified version of it. There's no drafting. Instead, you have cards in a tableau on the table, and you're choosing, I believe, columns of cards. And it's just better, in my opinion. I just like it better. I want to play it more than I do Isle of Cats. Isle of Cats is still great, and it has a really good solo mode too. But the Explore and Draw is kind of the one for us at this point. It's just simpler, it's just stripped down. It kind of gets to what we really want, which is just the kind of polyomino trying to fit on your boat. Gets away with all the drafting and stuff like that, all the scoring cards and kind of the things that bog down the game a little bit. And so the Isle of Cats Explore and Draw is really, really fun. They're all good, but if you haven't tried the roll and write, try it out. It's good.
Number 1 is a card drafting game called It's a Wonderful World. This is a game that we had heard about for quite a while, actually, before we finally got a chance to try it. It's a card drafting kind of tableau engine building game where you are in a futuristic, near future, I'll say, society, and you are kind of representing a nation as you are building up these cards, which represent various, productions and advancements and things like that, which start producing different cubes, which then help you produce, more and more kind of cards. So you're kind of really trying to build up as fast as you can this kind of self-producing engine of resources and things to be able to do more and more, but you only have 4 quick rounds in which to do this. So what's really cool about this game is you start off by drafting out cards, meaning you take one from your stack of cards, you put it aside and you pass the rest to the player on your left or right depending on the round, and then you do that again until you all have a new kind of set of cards from which you've selected as you pass those cards around. Then when you get those cards, these cards are gonna be, again, various buildings you can build. They'll have certain resource requirements that are required for them to go into your nation and start to produce resources or give you endgame scoring. But each of them can also be recycled for a single resource of whatever color is depicted on that card. And this is really where the game comes together, because you're not gonna be able to construct every single thing you come across. There's just not enough time, there's not enough resources to go around. So being selective in terms of like, what do I set aside for construction? What am I gonna try to actually build here versus what am I gonna recycle to try to build those cards with is really important. Finding that perfect balance of efficiency so you don't waste any resources, but you don't put yourself too deep underwater where you can't get things built and you're not producing really anything. So after you kind of do that recycling phase, you go into production phase. So any cards that are in your empire already will start producing resources, and then you can immediately put those on the cards you have under construction, and then that might complete a card mid-round. And if the black resource hasn't come up yet and you have a newly completed card and then you move into black resources, it'll immediately start producing resources. And that's really fun, that kind of timing element. There's some set collection elements, again, cards that will score for every like blue card you complete, for example, might get you points, so you can kind of tailor your focus a little bit, because producing resources is fantastic, but resources aren't points. You need points to win the game. That's usually where I do not do so well. But this one is so fun because it goes by so quickly. It's all pretty much simultaneous play, so it doesn't take too long. It's gonna accommodate a high player count. It's one we keep coming back to, that is It's a Wonderful World.
So those are top 10 games that start with the letter I. Let us know down in the comments below any games that we missed.
We want to see your contributions to the alphabet. Let's go.
Indeed, indeed. Again, if you've been going through this series with us, continue on. It's been really cool to see everyone's lists. It's been really, really fun. But that is games that start with the letter I. My name is Nick.
I'm Mike.
We're the Brothers Murph, and we'll see you later, everybody.
I will.